I remember I was travelling in Tanzania on one of those overland truck trips. We were held up at gunpoint. Quite traumatic, as you can imagine. They had this really old dodgy gun that they were firing, bullet holes above our heads. And that night, I remember my tent mate and I, we were sitting there and we were going, okay, let's get our minds off this. What do we want to do? And in our delirium that we were still here, the first thing we said is we want to see Robbie Williams naked. And the second one I said I want to be a CEO of a men's professional football club. And that's how it all started. But the funniest thing is I really thought I had a higher chance at seeing Robbie Williams naked. 3.5 years later, I was the CEO of Perth Glory Football Club in Australia. It was an amazing journey. I got to work with fantastic people, and I felt a great privilege to be able to do it. I just want to say I absolutely love my job at YWCA. I love the people that I work with, like unsung heroes, and the fact that we get to have impact for women. I'm a transformational CEO. I thrive on getting justice, fairness, with a wee bit of curiosity and adventure thrown in. And I've lived in and worked in 10 different countries around the world.
I'm Gillett, and this is the Power of Women podcast. We're a platform that showcases and celebrates the strength, resilience, and achievements of women from all walks of life. And today we're going to take a look at a safe place to call home, because too many women in Australia and around the world are living in unsafe or unstable housing, if in fact they have housing at all. My guest today has made it her mission to change that. Michelle Phillips, the formidable CEO of YWCA Australia, is leading the charge to make safe and secure housing a national priority. But her path to leadership is anything but typical, from a spontaneous trip to the Caribbean to becoming the first CEO of a men's professional football team, to running abortion clinics across 3 countries. Today, she's building housing frameworks that put gender equality at their core. Michelle Phillips, welcome to the Power of Women podcast.
Oh, Di, thank you so much for having me. You make me sound amazing.
I have a feeling you might be, but we're going to explore that just a little bit further as we get into this today. And with that, Michelle, let's start with your origin story, if I could, and jumping on a plane to the Caribbean. You've described your career as unplanned. What was the moment that put all of that into motion?
I think I'm going to say it's the first flight. As soon as I got on that flight to go to Miami, I started to believe that I could do anything. And I know that sounds really broad, but I applied for the job via fax. This is way before mobile phones, way before internet. And then 2 weeks later, I was on a plane to Miami, hoping the person would meet me when they said they were going to meet me. And then before I knew it, I was on a gorgeous little island called Turks and Caicos between Cuba and the Bahamas. And why did I go? And this is the truth. That wasn't necessarily about the job. I actually just thought it'd be fun to live in the Caribbean. I arrived and I did not have the qualifications for the job. And I was calling my girlfriend back in Australia, which is about $50 a minute, going, help, what do I do? And I think that gave me the belief in myself, because I knew you didn't have to have everything planned. You didn't actually have to have every single qualification to be successful at what you did. And I think that's something that women often think they need to do. So it was a great belief. And from then I kept following that path.
So, given it was pre-internet and facsimiles are involved, and we might have a slightly younger audience that don't know what they are, but you can Google it. How did that job come on your radar?
It was an ad in a paper, and it just said accountants wanted in the Caribbean. And I went, okay, I'll give it a go. And I must admit, I was probably the only one who applied. It wasn't cool and trendy back then, but I got the job. And the next thing I know, I was living on a beautiful island, working with people I loved and doing great work.
Awesome. So let's talk about football and leading the charge for women, from that international travel to becoming a part of an international football club. What was the connection in those two parts of your life?
I think it was interesting because I didn't realise it at the time, but for me, I think it was equality. I remember travelling. I was travelling in Tanzania on one of those overland truck trips, and we were held up at gunpoint, and it was quite traumatic, as you can imagine. They had this really old, dodgy gun that they were firing, bullet holes above our heads. And that night, I remember my tent mate and I, we were sitting there and we were going, okay, let's get our minds off this. What do we want to do? And in our delirium of being excited that we were still here, it's the first thing we said is we want to see Robbie Williams naked. And the second one we said is, I want to actually be a CEO of a men's professional football club. There was only one at the time in the UK, and she was amazing. And that's how it all started. But the funniest thing is I really thought I had a higher chance at seeing Robbie Williams naked, but actually 3.5 years later, I was the CEO of Perth Glory Football Club back in Australia. So for me, it was all about equality.
I didn't know that it was about equality when you wanted to see Robbie Williams naked, but we digress. So from there and coming back to Perth, you were part of launching the Women's A-League, as I understand it. What actually stands out for you at that point in time?
Yeah, no, it was a really exciting time, I have to say, because it was like 15 years ago now, if I remember it correctly. And I look at sport back then for women and sport now, and it goes to show if you invest in women and in equality, look what can happen. And setting up the W League.
Look at the Matildas today.
Correct, Matildas today. And it was interesting you say that, because we're back there, we're thinking, okay, what are the 3 objectives that we wanted out of the women's game? And one was that it continues, and 15 years later, it still continues, which was fantastic. The second one is that players could come from overseas to us, and overseas players could go over to, our players could go overseas.
And look at that, we're on the world stage in so many international clubs.
Exactly. And the last one, believe it or not, and it was definitely a pipe dream, I'm not sure, I think we've just put it there for ambition, was have a World Cup in Australia. And I look at it now and I had nothing to do with any of it. I set it up and then I left. So it's amazing women who came after me who did that. But I see that change. I see the change across women's sport. Now, you only have to look at the AFL, the NRL, still Football Australia, netball, and it's just, if you invest, there is a great return.
That has resonance as to how Power of Women came about. So I had the idea for this platform over a decade ago, and it was during 2023 for the World Cup that a byline came up on the screen with the Matildas playing on a morning breakfast show that said Power of Women. And I said to my husband, there is a sign if ever there was one, because I had the domain name for Power of Women, and I said, now's the time to do something about it. And when I originally had the concept, podcasting really wasn't on the radar, and pressed the button, and in 2024 we launched. So there is a connection between your story and mine.
I absolutely love that. And who would have thought Matildas would have a byline 15 years ago on national TV? And that's just absolutely brilliant. I love it.
Yeah, it is. So there's a lot more to your career than this, Michelle, because there was a turning point where you ended up working with Marie Stopes on reproductive health. Tell us about that role, because that's very different.
Yeah, it was really different. And for the listeners who might not know, Marie Stopes is the number one organisation who delivers sexual reproductive health services. It is predominantly abortion. And I led reproductive health services in Nepal, Cambodia and South Africa. And I have to say I was pretty naive about abortion rights when I first joined. And I just want to give you a feel for like my first weeks in each of those countries, because it was eye-opening for me. I remember arriving in Nepal, and I'd got a call from one of our clinics, and one of our clients had been jailed. She'd been raped by her brother-in-law. She had asked for an abortion. It was all legal, but then her family were trying to put her in jail for having an affair. And that is an everyday occurrence. I remember my first week in Cambodia, whereby at one of the clinics, a lady had just been dropped off outside. She had clearly had an illegal abortion from an unsafe provider. And even though we got her an ambulance, she didn't make it. She basically bled to death on the way to hospital. And I think then about my first week in South Africa, and these are hard to talk about. This 12-year-old girl had been raped and threatened if she told anyone they would murder her family. And by the time she'd presented to us, she was too far beyond the legal limit for us to be able to provide an abortion service. So I feel that these are just my first few weeks. I'm no longer naive about abortion, and this is something I'm extremely passionate about as well. At the beginning, when it was around fairness and justice, I have 4 key takeaways from my time is, even if you make abortion illegal, women are still going to have them. So please make it safe and provide the access. It's needed. Sadly, there is still that stigma associated with having an abortion. There's that shame and that you can't tell anyone. I'd really love women to be able to embrace women and be non-judgmental in driving a different culture around it. And this is the one I must admit I do get frustrated pretty much every US election and others, is abortion seems to be used as a political football. And it has massive amounts of impact on the ground. I can remember overnight, I think I lost nearly $40 million in being able to do services. It just happens, and it happens quickly. So I would love it if we could really do that. It's my body, my choice. I 100% sign up to that. And I think the last is, and you will have seen this one talking to a lot of women, it's the unsung heroes in our community services work. It's the doctors, nurses and team members who do it day in and day out, and at times sometimes even put their lives at risk. So it was an amazing journey. I got to work with fantastic people, and I felt a great privilege to be able to do it.
What an extraordinary career you have had. It's just such a diverse amount of experience. Well, you're now leading one of Australia's longest standing community organisations, being the YWCA. When you stepped into that role, what was the shape of the organisation? And I'd be really interested to hear what's led you to focus on housing at the centre of what you're working on today.
Oh no, Di, thanks so much. I think I just want to say I absolutely love my job at YWCA. I love the people that I work with, like unsung heroes, as I've just mentioned before, and the fact that we get to have impact for women. I joined the Y about 7 years ago now. It doesn't feel that long, but it is. It's 7 years ago. And it was quite a pivotal point because they were just pretty much all the Ys around Australia were merging into one national organisation. So I'm not going to lie, massive amounts of chaos, as you can imagine, in a merger, but also huge amount of opportunity to change, and that's exactly what we did. If I think about housing specifically, it has kind of always been in our fabric. We've been around for 140 years, and one of the earliest known stories is when Y women would be standing down at the docks in the 1800s, and women would come off the ships and they would actually meet them and make sure that they had a safe place to stay. So I feel like it's in our fabric, it's in our history. And there's one thing we probably learned in the last 7 years that I've been here is, and this is true, I think, for a lot of people, a home is more than just a roof over your head. It gives you that safe place. You can build connections with your community. You can hold down your job. You can have relationships, and you're looking after your health. So I feel that is where we really thought housing, homelessness and domestic family violence services, that's what we really want to be known for. And we are. And we are the leading experts in Australia.
And when we then marry together the experiences that you've had in the lead up, or the career lead up to today, this must be an absolute amalgam of all of that experience coming together and bringing that back to home territory.
Oh, it is so true, Di. It's even though they're so different, the connectors that you get between them, it's the stigma, it's the shame, it's the unable to access the services that you need, and the lack of investment in women's services or women themselves. So it's extremely connected, even though it's slightly different in context, but it's still very much there.
And frustratingly, there's a political football connection as well, because this is, safe housing and housing in Australia is well and truly a political football.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I would say there's been a significant underinvestment in housing in the last 13 years. And if you look at the moment, both federal and states are putting a lot of money into housing. but it takes time to build. So we're sitting here and our number one issue is there are not enough homes. And that is just a fact. And there's not enough homes for women and women's needs, and that is a key part. And when we think about that, it's like, it's great, but it's going to take time. So there is no overnight solution for us at the moment on solving the housing crisis. We've got to wait for all these houses to be built. We're building housing as well, but that's a 2 to 3 year pipeline, not a tomorrow pipeline.
Yeah. Yeah. So for many women, a safe place to live is not a guarantee, as we've pointed out in this in the prelude to this question. What are the realities you're seeing on the ground?
It's interesting. I think when I said, if you had asked me 7 years ago when I first started, how many people would have been impacted or know someone who's impacted from housing insecurity, I know I'd get 1 or 2 hands that are being put up, and that would be about it. I asked the same question about a month ago, and nearly every single person in the room had put their hand up. Everyone pretty much in Australia knows somebody or has actually impacted themselves, and this is about the conversation that's starting. So on the ground, when I was chatting to my Northern Territory General Manager, this is how it looks and this is how it feels for our team members and our clients and women at the moment. Women and children aren't able to leave abusive situations because there's nowhere to go. Women aren't able to really hold down a job because it's really hard to do that when you're sleeping in your car, sleeping in a tent or couch surfing. There is not enough money for the basics of food and medical supplies. Children can't go to school because there's no safe place for them to sleep. So this is what our teams see day in, day out on the ground. And you are searching for that unicorn piece, and that is, where is the housing piece in that? If you can get the housing and then put the support services around it, then you've got a lot better chance of women being able to stay housed and have a proper home, more than just a roof over their head.
And there's a misconception that homelessness happens to a certain type of person, be it male or female. Can you talk about the women who never thought it would happen to them?
Yeah, I think we all think at a point in time it happens to someone else, and we don't want to think that it could actually happen to us. But the truth is it does. And I think of women, and for us, those society cards are a bit stacked up against us for the housing insecurity, because if we think about the gender pay gap, the lower amounts of super, the more unpaid work we need to do when we take career breaks, and that joy of doing those financial negotiations in divorces and separations, all those really impact women's housing security. I was talking to a lady, I think she was just in her 70s, and she was fabulous. Her husband had just passed away, which was sad. She was going through those emotions, but she actually turned to anger really quickly, because what she'd found out was she thought she was going to have a safe family home, but her husband had actually gambled away their house, and they were actually renting back, and she had no idea. So she was sleeping in a car, and she was too embarrassed to tell her kids. And that's what we find is women don't like coming forward. They don't like seeing services. We had an amazing young woman the other day. She's a new young mum, and she'd been living in the same house for about 8 years, but the owners decided they wanted to sell, and they gave her 3 months' notice, which was all very fair. But the problem you have is, where is that unicorn rental home that she's going to get as a new mum? So luckily we managed to get her a space in time, and she didn't need to experience homelessness. That would not be what we want for her and new bub. But these are everyday stories. So you don't think it's going to happen to you, but actually when you look around, and you just have to see the community posts. If you're looking on your local community board, you will see lots of people wanting housing, a lot of mums, a lot of kids. And you walk down your streets, you can see the tent cities now, where people have had to take their belongings that they've got out of their home, and that's all they've got left. That's all they could carry, and they've got it in their tent. So I think for us, it's not about any particular choices that you make. It is actually the biggest systemic barriers that we have at the moment.
Yeah. And you said a moment ago that when you asked the question previously to when you asked it a few months ago, every hand in the room went up. Why are we regressing? Why are these numbers growing and the situation becoming, almost a pandemic, really?
Yeah, it's definitely a crisis for us. And I think there's kind of 4 areas if I thought about it. One was stating the obvious that I said before, there are not enough houses. There's just not. And look, the governments are doing a lot to build them, but that certainly takes time. But we need to make sure that it's also meets the needs of women, because we do have particular unique needs when we're doing housing. And what we find is housing is a general product at the moment, but what we actually need to do is making sure we're developing it for women. The changes in policy approach, and this goes back to the women's housing framework that we've designed, is making sure that you actually build houses that are right for women and their needs. At the moment, it's a value for money. And so what that means is, rightfully so, we understand why, but you'll squish as many of homes that you can on a particular block when you build. Fully understand the numbers have to stack up. That is value for money. But what it's not doing is bringing in the social value. So a lot of women that experience homelessness actually have children. So you end up building a lot of 1 and 2 bedroom homes, and the 3 and 4 bedroom homes are few and far between. So we'll have a lot, but they're not actually going to meet the needs of women and their families when they're actually seeking solutions. That for us we find quite key. So we're hoping the government in the next round will actually adjust that. And the hardest one to talk about at times is family and domestic violence. That is not going down. And the leading cause of homelessness for women is family and domestic violence. I think when a lot of people think about it, they think about crisis and shelters, and that is certainly needed, but it's actually that long-term housing. Where are you going to go afterwards? There is not enough long-term housing for women when they're actually wanting to leave the shelter or the crisis centre that they're at. And so that's why a lot of women do stay in very unsafe situations. And the last one is one I think we don't talk about enough, and that is support services. So we talk a lot about building houses, but what we don't talk about is the support needs around it. So what support do you need when you're moving into your house? What support do you need to stay in your house? I find it quite interesting when we did the women's housing framework, and we developed that with women by women. And they told us what they needed, and it's not complex and it's not difficult. But I'll just give you an example, if that's all right. The security. So security we take for granted. I think how often when you walk home, do you then stand in front of your house and think, is it safe for me to go into my house? Do I have a lit path going down the road? Do I have to actually turn a corner and someone might be standing there for me? Is my lift closed off? Because I don't want my ex-partner to be able to come to my floor. We were chatting with one of the ladies and the architect's going, it's great, you've got to lower the fence because then you get a lot more light in your house. And the lady's going, that's fantastic. I actually don't care about the light. What I care about is I want it higher so my ex-abusive partner can't see over my fence and watch me from across the street. So these are the things that we're looking at and making sure that we want to make sure that the housing is built for women and meets their needs. As you can tell, I get very passionate about it.
Oh, absolutely, and I'm sitting here with goosebumps as I'm reflecting of the builds around my neighbourhood and thinking what does and doesn't meet some of those what sound like simple requirements, and sadly we've all heard horrendous stories on the basis of that safety not being guaranteed for women. So quite extraordinary. I could ask you how you sleep at night, Michelle.
Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, if I'm honest. But but that's why we do the work we do. And I think, I sit there and my team members see it on the ground every day. So they're the ones that I worry about, and they're the ones that I want to make sure are okay when they go home.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. Well, coming up, we're going to explore the warning signs many women don't see until it's too late. If you're loving the Power of Women podcast, be sure to jump on to our YouTube channel and hit that subscribe button to ensure you never miss an episode. So, Michelle, let's talk about prevention. You've said housing security isn't always caused by domestic violence, but you certainly said it's one of the leading issues that leads to it. Who else is vulnerable, though? We've touched on it in some detail, but could you just give us a fuller picture of that?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think 5 years ago, we would have said the most vulnerable women over 50. It's actually changed quite significantly, and I don't think anyone's really aware. It's young women, aged between 25 and 34. They are at the biggest risk of housing insecurity at the moment, and I would not have thought that 5 years ago. Not at all.
We're not talking about that because we're still talking about females over 50 as the stat.
Yeah, at the moment, the young women are the largest numbers of people coming into the specialist homelessness services. We've seen a significant growth. And a lot of that is driven from family and domestic violence. They also have really insecure jobs. They've got rent hikes that they just can't afford. We did before the election, we did a national polling of 1,000 young women and gender diverse people. 38% said they have fear of eviction right now, and others worry about it constantly.
38%. How many in that sample size?
1,000. All over the country. And it's quite harrowing because I know, and rightfully so, there's a lot of focus on older women over 50, but it's the younger women coming through. And what I really love about working at the Y is the Y actually stands for young. I might not be that in age, but definitely in spirit. But what we do is, what's going to be quite important is that young women do sit at the table and are able to have discussions about solutions that are right for them. A solution that's right for myself, being over 50, is not going to be the same solution that is going to be for a younger woman. And we've got what we call at the Y is a digital activist group. It's a group of young women who really do feed into our election policies, all of our advocacy. So I was going to say, if there's any amazing young women out there who would like their voice heard through housing insecurity, please go to our website, if you don't mind me plugging, ywca.org.au, and please come and join us at the Y. We'd really love to have your voice, because I think unless young people are actually at that table, we're not going to have the right solutions for them.
So what can women do to empower themselves?
It's always, I get asked this quite a lot, and I think what I find is it's never about a choice that a woman has made. It's really about these systemic barriers that are causing housing insecurity. But there's kind of 3 early signs that our clients tell us about, and that you can look and you can see about people that you love and you look around. Is the first one is they often say, I'm staying at on a friend's couch, I'm at friends, but it's said in a kind of fun, jovial way. But if you actually dig a bit deeper, they're not. They're either couch surfing, sleeping in their car, or actually in a tent. So that goes back to that stigma where women really don't like asking for help. They don't like putting their hand up, and they feel ashamed, and they will cover it up as much as they can, which makes a lot of women's homelessness quite hidden. Rental stress is the obvious big one, and you will see it if you work with people. You can see their escalating worry about paying rent, and you will see them skip meals, and you will know that it's happening around you, and if you want to ask the hard questions. The last one, and I think this is probably the one that is really quite obvious as well, is people who used to be quite a lot of activities, I'll start to withdraw. They will actually have their own isolation, because the last thing they want to do is have a conversation with someone about what their weekend was, when their weekend was really, I need to find the nearest shower and I need to work out where the nearest laundromat is so I can try and wash some clothes if I'm lucky. And they don't want to get into any of those discussions, so you see them start withdrawing, and they don't participate in anything. So if you do see any of these signs, and as hard as it is, and sometimes it's such an uncomfortable conversation, lean in, because we would love and see if you can help connect women to their services in their local areas. There's a lot of amazing charities like ourselves in the local areas, but it is a hard discussion to have at the beginning, but if you do it in a non-judgmental way, it's great to do. As I think I said quite clearly is women just don't ask for help. So it's giving them that space to know that they can and that if they're able to, and trying to get that support before they do actually become homeless.
So if we see those signs that really are the signs that somebody's going to benefit from support, how do we actually approach it? Could you talk us through some examples so that we're not bringing shame on the person we're trying to assist?
Yes, so for me, it's around listening. I think about all my time, even, you mentioned my career, it is quite connected. All my time is listening, and you have to listen with no judgment. And then think about, you might not get everything in the first discussion, but then how you can go away, come back with potential things. So when people are in a lot of housing stress, it just gets so overwhelming that finding solutions, and sometimes there's some in front, sometimes there's none, that's what they need help with. So it's just leaning in, non-judgmental, and listen. And it's and not to keep saying, I know someone who is. That's not useful for people at times unless you've actually experienced yourself. Just say, I hear you. How can I help you?
Yeah, that's a very powerful couple of words, I hear you, because that's probably half the issue. They feel like they're not being heard.
And let them know that it's nothing they've done. And as I said, these are systemic. A lot of women sit there and think that they've made a wrong choice and it's their fault and they're to blame. And that is not the case. This is larger than any single decision that somebody makes. And letting them know that it's okay. Like that is a big one, and that they will be okay.
So you've worked across some really challenging sectors, it would be fair to say, and equally you've worked across the sporting sector, which would have had a mix of celebration and frustration. I have no doubt. But what's one story or one moment that keeps you going when this starts to feel overwhelming?
Oh, I might get a bit emotional when I say this, so bear with me if I stumble my words. It's my time at Murray Stopes, and it was actually my team member. She just wasn't feeling well, and she's just lying on the bed, and I was holding her hand because she was just getting a little bit agitated, trying to calm her. And she said, you just have to continue for me. And what she meant is actually just, can I fill in for her for the day? No big deal. That was actually my last conversation with her. She didn't make it. And from then on, those are the words, and I think of her, and I think of the words, you can continue. Even at the time, it was nothing meant in that context. But I get quite emotional even thinking about it now. But that's what I come back to.
So how do you manage your own emotional well-being?
Oh, it's taken me a long time. I was a bit crap at it at the beginning, I'm not going to lie. So for me, it's exercise, and it's actually, and I must say, not talking to anyone, probably for half a day on the weekend. I really like to recharge, and I know what works for me now. And I think this is a thing, and I say this to everybody who works in the community services sector, they know what works for them. And for me, I have to do daily exercise. I have to switch off on the weekend, and I have to know that I have a role, but I can't fix everything. And that's quite powerful, because at the beginning, particularly when I joined Murray Stopes, I thought I had to fix absolutely everything. And I can't. I have to know what bits I do have control over and what bits I can't. And then if women need that support, I will connect them to somebody else who has. Otherwise, it just gets too overwhelming.
And have you landed here? Sorry, I was just going to say, Michelle, have you landed at this point yourself through experience, or have you had mentors who've helped you realise how to manage this?
I had amazing mentors. I don't like the word lucky. Lucky just sounds like it just happens, but I think you create it and you get connections. And I've been I've used my South Africa word blessed for that. It's, and I wouldn't have been able to do it without them. It's not something that I was necessarily looking for, but it's interesting when mentors pop up where you least expect them. I remember in sport, it was actually my chair at the time, and we're still in contact, but he was an older man, and he just fought for me at every stage for a female. And I hadn't had that before. And I was quite young. I was still under 30, and I just thought, this is fantastic. I love it. And then I had amazing women in the space. Maria Davison-Crabb, she was the one who really supported bringing medical abortion into the country. And I had at the Y, Helen Conway. And if anyone gets to meet Helen Conway, she is a force of nature, and I absolutely love her. So it's all these amazing women that have helped me on the way. And not to say my mum. My mum is my favourite.
Yeah, that's absolutely brilliant, because too often we hear the lack of support, but when we hear about that from across the gender divide and women supporting women, we love hearing those stories. So thank you. Finally, Michelle, talking to our listeners and throwing it out there, whether they're policymakers, philanthropists or everyday citizens, to support women's housing or support safe housing for women, what do you need?
Oh, I like it. I would say first one, policymakers. Let's move and balance value for money to social value. Let's make sure we start building housing that actually meets women's needs. There is a need for 1 and 2 bedders, but we would love some 3 or 4 beds as well. And for that, it needs funding. The second one, philanthropists and investors. You can invest in women's housing and have returns. So if there's anyone out there listening who'd love to invest in women's housing, please hit me up. I would absolutely love to have the discussion with you. And for the listeners, just every day, I think there's some real fundamentals that can happen. One is vote. Voting is really powerful. Vote for women-positive policies. And too often we don't do that, or we don't think about it in the whole policies, but it's really important. The other one I would say is make sure you do lean in, be aware around you, and don't be afraid of having those uncomfortable discussions. You don't have to have all the answers. People do just need to feel care, and empathy is really important. And please feel free to volunteer at your local charity, where everyone's always after support and help, and it doesn't take a lot. It's a couple of hours a week or an hour every month, whatever you can do. So for me, they're the big ones, but I feel like it's not going to be fixed. We can't just rely on government. We've actually all got to have a role to play in that. And dare I say, I would love society to change how they value women, and less women die every year through violence, and less women actually having to experience domestic violence.
Yeah, yes to that. So what's the conversation you want women to start having more loudly, more urgently, and more unapologetically?
I feel the time now is right. The spotlight is on the housing crisis. If we don't have more homes built specifically for women, we will not solve the housing crisis for women. So I would love any listeners out there, be bold, be unapologetic, and really drive government and others to start invest in women's housing so we can actually have more housing for women. I believe human right, it's a basic human right for everyone to be able to have a safe and affordable home. And it's our job to really push so women can. And I would love it if they would do it. As I said, come and join the Y and join our digital activist group, but we want people who are pushing at a local level for women's housing.
Michelle, when we started this conversation, you made reference to unsung heroes. I would have to say I would put you right up there on the top of the list of unsung heroes. And you said to me this was your very first podcast. So you need to do more of this and put yourself out there, because I think your personal story as part of the rallying cry as to why people would get behind and support the organisations that you represent is such a powerful one.
Di, thank you so much. I must admit, I do it for the women, and I love my team, and that goes back to why I absolutely love working at the Y. And for me, it's the people on the ground. They're the ones that do the work, and they're the ones that, and we're all together, we can make a difference. That's why I love the listeners. Please, you have a voice, you can make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we wrap up today, look, this conversation really was a stark reminder that housing isn't just about shelter, but it's about dignity, safety, and about survival. And Michelle's not just fighting for bricks and mortar, as you can hear. There's so much for. She's fighting for structural change, and that women's stories that really make the headlines really need to be heard. If this episode moved you, please share it and take a moment to explore the work of YWCA. And as Michelle said, even if you can donate simply an hour a month or an hour a week, it's all of us who've got to play a role in making a difference to drive this change, because quite frankly, everybody deserves to be able to call somewhere a safe place home. Until next time. If you're loving the Power of Women podcast, hit that subscribe button and be sure that you never miss an episode. Until next time.